suffer, knowing well the price might be, laying down their lives and saying with their lives, let freedom ring. Let freedom ring from the mountains, freedom ring from sea to sea, let freedom ring to every heart that longs for hope and liberty, let freedom ring to every nation, freedom ring near and far, let freedom ring with celebration in the halls of every heart, let freedom ring.
From the heart of every patriot rings a song of liberty.
It's a song that breaks oppression's hold and cries, let freedom ring, let it ring. From the mountains, freedom ring, from sea to sea, let freedom in the halls of every heart, let freedom ring, let
Child, for I am weak and weary and helpless and defiled. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story of Jesus and his love. Tell me the sweet slowly that I may take it in, that wonderful redemption, God's remedy for sin. Tell me the story often, for I forget it soon. The early dew of morning has passed away at noon. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story of Jesus and his love. Tell me the old story when you have cause to fear that this world's empty glory is costing me too dear. Tell me the story always if you would really be in any time a comforter to me. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story of Jesus and his love. Amen. Good singing. You may be seated. Boy, it's important for us to hear that old story. I don't think we forget it like we don't remember, but we need to be reminded of that. So good singing tonight. I've got a lot of sign-up sheets here on the lectern that I'll remind you about in just a moment. We've got a lot of things going on this month here at Second Baptist Church, so kind of in order of those things, tonight, following the service tonight, there's a financial stewards meeting. They'll be reviewing the finances of our church from first quarter of this year. And then Thursday through Friday, it's the church-wide camp out. It's also going to be Noah's Flood 2.0. So we're going to see however people want to brave the weather. I told them Sunday morning that there is no condemnation for anyone that chickens out. Because I'm thinking about doing that myself, to be honest. And so I just decided we're not going to judge anyone for doing that.
You all are welcome to brave the weather. I think there are people that plan to be out there maybe the entire time. There is a covered pavilion where we will be enjoying at least Friday night dinner. And so if you still have a boat or a way to get out there, we'd love for you to come join us out there. Churchwide camp out the 3rd through the 5th. All right, so this coming Sunday night is the church conference, and many of you have received the recommendations to amend the bylaws that was handed out a couple Sunday nights ago. And so this coming Sunday would be the time to vote on that. If you have any concerns or questions about those, would you please come see Pastor before the service, and we'd love to address those as best as we can. And then this next week, it's missions conference, and that's hard to believe that that's coming up that quickly. But missions conference is a week from tomorrow. As it has in the years gone by, it starts at 7 o'clock Thursday, Friday. 10 o'clock is breakfast with the ladies here at the Minute Country Kitchen. And then our Sunday schedule would be our normal Sunday schedule. We had a ladies' night. The ladies came here last Tuesday, had a great meeting from what I can tell. And men, we have ours on the 15th, so right there, I believe that's going to be the second Tuesday, or the third Tuesday, rather, of this month. And then Resurrection Sunday is coming up. And so that's going to be a great time. This year, we plan purposefully to have an outreach on the day before Easter, before Resurrection Sunday. So come. It's a great opportunity to invite someone to church. That and the candlelight service are two great reasons for people to come. So we'll come and make a special effort then, and then men's advance coming up at the end of the month. So in light of all those, we have a sign up here. This will be
Güzel gözüküyor. Çapraz bir şey yapmayı unuttum. Yem vermemişiz. Güzel gözüküyor.
all three verses of Under His Wings, I'm Safely Abiding. Verse number 1 of 620.
Under His wings I'm safely abiding, though the night deepens and tempests are wild. Still I can trust Him, I know He will keep me. He has redeemed me, and I am His child. Under His wings, under His wings, who from His love can sever? Under His wings, my soul shall abide, safely abide forever. Under His wings, what a refuge in sorrow, how the heart yearningly turns to His rest. Often when earth has no balm for my healing, there I find comfort, and there I find blessed. Under His wings, under His wings, who from His love can sever? Under His wings, my soul shall abide, safely abide forever. Under His wings, oh, what precious enjoyment! There will I hide till life's trials are o'er. Sheltered, protected, no evil can harm me. Resting in Jesus, I'm safe evermore. Under His wings, under His wings, who from His love can sever? Under His wings, my soul shall abide, safely abide forever. You may be seated.
That this whole study is about the fact that as we have church and we're members, and it was birthed and started out of I Love My Church Month, and we took from the thing here that Paul has said there's some things we're not to be ignorant of, and one of those says, now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I would not have you to be ignorant. And then in Corinthians and then Romans, Paul gives us three different lists of how gifts are motivational, which is what we're studying. There are 7 of those. And then there are ministry gifts, which means that whenever we begin to, how we're assigned within the local body, we are given a ministry gift, and then and that could be from any of the motivational gifts. And then we have manifestation, which means how it shows up in our day-to-day life. And so as we begin to study those, we've come up to the point where we've studied the gift of prophecy, serving, teaching, and exhortation. Tonight we will do giving, and that will leave 2 more. One would be administration or administration, as you would. Ruling is the way it's pronounced or the way it's given listed in the Bible here. Ruling, and then mercy. And so all of these can be identified or assigned to anybody in the church, and they have been assigned to anyone who is saved. And so when we discover those, and the reason I tell you what we've got coming is because I don't think you should miss any of them. I think you should at least go back, because it's kind of a comprehensive test But when you go back and we give you out some sheets at the end of this, we'll go over it and give you some actual time to where you can check some of those qualities and say, this applies to my life. This is what's going on. Now, not what you do, but what makes you go inside. What pleases you? What brings you the joy of the Lord? And then as we do that, we'll see how these gifts also interact. So it's going to go on just beyond the information. I want you to discover your gift and then find the place where God wants you to plug in and use that gift. Then as we go into starting points at the end of this month, for those of you that have not been through that with us, now if you want to go again, nobody's going to stop you in that, but we'll meet that kind of as a pastor's class. And what starting points will cover, it's really a new church orientation, new church member orientation. And if you've been through it, you can kind of get that picture. But if you haven't been through that, we'll just kind of excuse you from your current class, go through that, and then go right back to where you were. And our teachers will be aware, but we need to kind of keep this going, because if we're growing, we want everybody to be on the same page as to where we can plug in, how can we use our gifts, and we think it's going to help the body life of our church. So all of this is to say we're really investing in those particular things, and we want you to know how we're doing that. So this evening, we're going to cover the spiritual gift of giving, where we find this listed as it comes down here in verses 3 through 9. In verse 4, it says, there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are the differences of administrations, but the same Lord. And there are diversities of operations. And there you see the motivation, you see the ministry and the manifestation, but it's all the same Lord. And then in verse 7, but the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. For to one is given by the Spirit the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge, and by the same Spirit. And actually, where I'm wanting to read is not here. Okay. It would be there, but I'm in Corinthians instead of Romans. Don't laugh at me. You've done it before. Now, here we go. Here we go. Verse 3, Romans 3:12. This will help. I was reading one of the list. It just wasn't the one we're working from. For I say through the grace given unto me and to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man is his measure of faith. For as we have many members in one body, and all the members have not the same office, so we being many are one body in Christ, and every one members of one another. Now that's important, because gifts aren't meant for us to act alone. They're for a body and how the body functions. And so many times we want to desire, and this church at Corinth, not Rome, but at Corinth, they were thinking, well, I've got one gift, it's better than another, and then they wanted to exercise tongues, and they say, hey, look what I can do. And that's not why God gives us gifts. He does it so that we can have these kinds of things to edify one another. Then it says, having then gifts in verse 6, differing according to the grace that is given to us, whether prophecy, let us prophesy, according to the proportion of faith, or ministry, that service, let us wait on our ministering, or he that teacheth on teaching, or he that exhorteth on exhortation, and he that giveth, which is where we are tonight, let him do it with simplicity. He that ruleth or administers, organizes with diligence. He that showeth mercy with cheerfulness. Now what we find out as we come down here, we find out that there's some principles that underlie these, and they are starting to they're given right after verse 8. Because let love be without dissimulation. That has to do with the gift of prophecy. For giving, when we get down here, it's listed, the qualities needed are in verse 13. And you can see right from the first word, distributing to the necessity of the saints, given to hospitality. And so one that is going to give, what do? They're distributing to the needs of the saints. And then they have to have those kinds of things. Now, the person that would best demonstrate this probably in Scripture, or one that we've chosen for the study, would be the Apostle Matthew, the writer of the Gospel here of Matthew. And so he illustrates that gift of giving, as you can see, in a lot of his detail of his writing, and giving to the needs of fellow believers and the hospitality. And so the basic principle that's most needed for the direction of a giver's life is that of ownership. You can't really give something unless you know who owns it. If you don't know what the resource is, then you really, if you have the gift of giving, not everybody has everything that's in the world. There's some rich people, but not everybody has everything except for God. So it's very important to know that it's not how much you give or what your financial wealth is. It's the one that owns everything, and they have to know that principle of ownership in order to function well. Just like there is a principle for every one of these, that's the one for this. And it allows the giver the freedom to respond whenever they are in a situation they know where their gift is needed, but they can respond to God's direction because it's not their resources that they're giving, it's God's. Now, we're going to start with the characteristics and misuses again of all the gifts. If you'd like, take half of a sheet of paper, or take a sheet of paper, draw a line down it, number to 9, and here we go. All right, same things for all of these, and so it's pretty easy for you to take notes. First of all, a giver is able to see resources. Have you ever went to some place and you say, well, I sure like to do that, I just don't know how I could afford it, or I don't know how we as a church could ever do that. But a giver sees resources. It's gifted. They see ways to get to that point without the rest of us don't. This ability to discern investments allows them to use assets of both time and money, or even possessions, to advance the work of the Lord. They get creative in some of these things. Even if he personally has limited funds, the giver is still able to recognize, they're able to see things that are available and resources to draw on them as needed. They may not have it, but they know who does, or they see something over here. They see the stockpile and how to turn that into an investment in God's scheme of things here. The givers also, number 2, is going to invest themselves, then the gift. They're going to put some skin in the game, if you will. They have a need first of all, to receive continual assurance that their decisions are in God's will, no matter the amount. So therefore, they're going to be testing that with their own personal thing. They're not going to just give the money and then walk away. They're going to want to see that God's at work in this situation. And since all believers should practice giving, Paul explained the how-tos to the Macedonian church. And yes, you're saying, well, that's not the gift of giving, but I give. Yes, we're supposed to do that. So here's how Paul described it to them in 2 Corinthians. He said, they first gave their own selves to the Lord, and then unto us by the will of God. What they did is they sought to get close to God, as we studied about dealing with the enemy this past Sunday. They sought to get as close to God as they could, because when they did with the gift that they had, then they were able to turn that around and give to someone else and know that it was in the will of God. Third thing is the giver desires to give high-quality gifts. Since he's able to determine value, this motivates him to give a quality gift. And the reason is because he wants it to have lasting impact, both for the individual need that's being met and for the kingdom's sake. Matthew recorded in detail, more than any other written, the gifts given to Christ. Don't know if you know this, but if you do a harmony study of the Bible, you know what things are in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the commonality of those. Matthew recorded more of the details of the gifts that were given to Christ than all the other gospel writers together. So things like the gift of Mary Magdalene, whenever, the ointment, the precious ointment, and it was costly, and they discussed selling it and giving it away. That detail is in Matthew, but not in the others. The gift of the Magi, the wise men that we know them, that's nowhere else except in Matthew. And when he talked about the gift of the gold, the frankincense, the myrrh, recognizing the value of those things there. And then also something that maybe you would pass over, but is very expensive and very useful. And we talk about it. We're going to be talking about it a lot in the next 2 or 3 weeks here as we come up to the Resurrection Sunday. But Joseph's tomb had been unused. That was a very costly event that took place, because not everybody could pay for and have a tomb hewn out of stone so that they'd have a place for their dead. And that detail is in Matthew. So those kinds of things just show that they have a desire to give a high quality of a gift. But then the fourth thing is the giver has a hope that the gift is going to be an answer to prayer. Down deep inside of them, they want to kind of be a pipeline of blessing from the Lord. Even when a need is not obvious, the giver who is in fellowship with the Lord could be prompted to give. They just feel and see and sense needs that perhaps you and I, or people that have not been gifted so, they're going to want to be that pipeline through that. And it's ultimately confirmed in their life that it was God's will when he learns it's fulfilled an unknown need or an answer to a special prayer. They give a gift, then they find out, you don't know, we've been praying and we didn't know how this was going to happen without this. And we hear those stories, but that also is exemplary or exemplified in the life of a giver. And it's a fun thing to be on that side whenever you're able to do it. But for a giver, that becomes more of a natural thing than maybe for others. And then the giver also desires to give secretly. And that's the fifth thing there. They have a desire to give secretly. As a giver looks to the Lord for direction, he expects the recipients to look to the Lord for the provision. In other words, that doesn't mean they don't give to the church. Doesn't mean they don't put their name ever on anything, that everything's anonymous. But what it does mean is that in the secret of what they do, they're wanting to be sure that the Lord gets the credit and that the person receiving is able to give credit to the Lord. That's very important. A giver knows the future reward of heaven, laying up treasures for yourselves in heaven, where things aren't corrupted, but where those things are taken away, that's more valuable than a present praise. That's why he quietly and often gives anonymously. But then in Matthew 6, you remember that on the 3 when ye's, when you pray, when you give alms, and when you fast. Those are the 3 when ye's that are in Matthew 6. This one is, take heed that you do not your alms before men to be seen of them. Otherwise you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly. What a wonderful verse for those that have the gift of giving, because they get that. Then another thing is the giver is concerned that giving will corrupt. They so sure that they want this thing to be operational with the Lord, they don't want this to be a corrupting thing. A giver understands the destructiveness of the love of money. They know that sin is there and they can see it. And he is also aware that the disciplines of God has taught him while acquiring wealth may not have been learned by those needing assistance. Some people are poor because they're born into poverty, or their condition is poverty, or they've given things away according to the Lord. But some people are poor because of their own wastefulness or their ignorance of how to attain wealth. And the giver is acutely aware of that. They know that, and they want to be sure that they're aware that these things here is not a corruption. In other words, we don't want to be an enabler to other things that a person might be lazy, or maybe they've squandered an opportunity. So he looks for ways to give that avoid dependency, slothfulness, and extravagance. Now, the seventh thing is the giver exercises personal thriftiness. Doesn't just expect it of other people, but you're thinking, well, these people have to be wealthy. A giver does not necessarily have a bank account of a certain amount of money. That's not, if a child is saved, they can become a giver. Now, that doesn't mean they want to just get all their toys and bring them to Sunday school and give them all away. That's not necessarily, sometimes that's just because they want to be popular or something like that. But what happens here is the giver, it will have a personal, they understand value in all things, so they have a personal thriftiness. And what the giver is often, what the giver is often the result of frugality, what they've become, and a contentment over time. We're just satisfied with who they are. They're comfortable in their own skin, and they don't really have to have more, or necessarily do they feel like that they're overindulgent. They just have a personal thriftiness. The giver's always going to be concerned about getting the best buy. They think usually these are the kind of people that have a math mind, and they think in percentages more than total cost. They're the ones that go to Walmart and read the per servings on the, how much it costs and all that. Now, you may do that for other reasons as well, but the giver's always conscious of that. And he spends extra time and effort to save money and to be resourceful with what he has. Then, eighthly, if that's a word, the giver will use their gifts to multiply giving. I don't know if you've ever heard of when people raise funds, maybe on the radio, the ones that we listen to, they'll have fundraising times, and they'll do things with matching gifts. And this is popular with the giver, because the part of that motivation for the giver is to encourage other people to get involved in giving. They have so much fun giving, they want other people to give. And so they might put up a large amount to get other people to give, because they want them to realize the blessing of what it's like to be able to turn that money into something that will glorify God. And so the giver may provide a matching fund or the last payment in order to encourage others to give. It goes along this way, and here's the final one. And a lot of times they're just creative in the way that they give, because they want it to be multiplied, and they see the blessing and they want others to be blessed. Then the giver confirms finally amounts with wise counsel. They may be anonymous in their giving, but they're not anonymous in gaining wisdom. The giver reacts to pressure appeals because of this, and doesn't, I want this confirmed with God. You're not going to hurry me into a quick buy or something here. He looks instead for financial needs that others tend to overlook. And so I'm going to give you an example here. I will also tell you, this is not my gift, but I am going to tell you that sometimes you learn from givers. Down where my son Stephen is a pastor in Mobile, Alabama, there's a road, a major two roads that are on a corner where their church is, but their church is one driveway off of the major north-south route. And beside their church property are 4 houses. One of them is for sale, and actually they're landlocked a little bit if they, just because their only access is a single drive. If you've got 2 cars going up and down it, I don't know if you could do that or not. Probably could, but somebody's going to have to get off in the grass. Lovely property, everything's fine, what's going on. But my dream comes down here, and I'm going, he said, I sure wish we could someday get that so we could drive through that property. I said, have you thought about buying an option on it? Okay, that's what a giver would think. Okay, do this. But I said, what you really need to do is get your men together in the church and just put this out here and say, when this goes up for sale, pray about it. And one of you that already has some things settled, purchase that and then rent it back out for now. And let it pay itself off. Just let it go. And I mean financially. Don't let the thing go. But then when the church needs to open that up and then the church buys that property from you instead of having to compete with the market and get 4 or 5 of those houses. And pretty soon the church will own that whole face to that road and you will double your land. And I'm not saying that because of me. I'm just saying that is a natural way for a giver to think. And trust me, there are other reasons I'm not a giver, but that just illustrates a way that they think. A husband with the gift of giving is going to confirm an amount with the wife. We're coming up with that. How do you know how much to give for faith promise? A great time for a family to do that. You may even have individual incomes, but if you have a gift of giving, they'll confirm that amount so that they know that they're walking, especially if it's something over time, they don't want to be walking out of the will of God. And so those are some of the things that a giver will do. Any questions so far about the uses of the gift of giving? Let's move on to the misuses, okay? And here's some of the common ones with the gift of giving. There's the danger of hoarding resources for self. That danger comes because the fear of the Lord is the key to effective use of the gift of giving, knowing who owns everything. One way to learn the fear of the Lord is by regular giving, and that's the purpose of the tithe. When you go back to Deuteronomy, where some things were instituted about giving gifts, one of the reasons we are to do that is because we learn the fear of the Lord. We either, I've heard people say this before, and it's true in Scripture, for a Christian, you, and it's a crude way to say it, but you either give the tithe or God gets it. You know, it may not go through the church, but somehow He's going to find out and let you know that He is the one that is your ultimate provider. And you can either do that in faith, and you might not think you can afford it or that, it has to do this. But folks, the Bible even calls it robbing, and it's a thief. Wherein have you failed me, Malachi says, and that you've robbed me. And so that's an important thing here. So if a giver stops using his gift, and here's the point, he's going to begin to lose that fear of the Lord, and the practice of storing up will cause him to become stagnant in what he should be doing in his gift. He's not being used. And so the second thing is they can use the gift to control people. Since a giver has the desire for his gifts to be wisely invested and used, he's going to often buy a quality item to donate rather than give the money for it. But if the items are purchased or projects are sponsored by a giver, they may be perceived as a means to control the lives and ministries. Now, this happened in this church. There was somebody that had a inheritance, came into some money, and gave it, or wanted to give the money, but then wanted to tell the stewards how to distribute it. And the problem is that the needs for the church were quite different, because what was there was going to kind of become a memorial to that person instead of to meet the needs. If a giver's in the true sense of the Lord, that won't happen. But they can cause that gift to control people. And then a giver that also is a misuse, they could force a high living standard. And what happens here is when a giver's focus is more on the quality of the gift rather than meeting the need, they can cause the receiver to become dissatisfied with the quality of the things that he owns or the things that God has already provided him. I'm not satisfied with my house because this guy gave me a Cadillac and it doesn't fit in this community, so I need a bigger house. Probably not. And so if there's a misuse there, it's not, and it's there and used kind of as an impressive thing instead of what's really needed. Givers can also excuse personal luxuries, things for themselves, on the basis that I've got plenty because I've already given all this other stuff away. However, when he's not faithful in little, God cannot trust him with much. So the personal frugality has to come back. Fourthly, the giver can begin to feel guilty about personal assets. When he's not in fellowship with the Lord, the giver can begin to feel guilt as he stores up funds and doesn't understand what God's going to do in the future because he thinks he's got to empty this out ever so often, and I've just got to live by faith. Well, even if he is preparing for a special need, he must have the reassurance from the Lord that his plans are according to God's will. The fifth thing is he or she rejects pressure appeals. So what happens here is when a giver reacts to all appeals for funds or looks for only the hidden and unannounced needs, he may fail to recognize the Lord's direction. Here's a place that's in point for our church. You're going to hear pastors say a lot about faith promise, how we do that, and how I'm going to educate the church how that we participate. Well, if you're a giver and you're out of fellowship with the Lord, you may misunderstand what I'm trying to lead people or teach people to do of how to participate. But you'll notice that I purposefully never mention amounts except for the totals that we're going to have. And the reason we do have to do that is because not everybody has done that. Some people are new. Some people don't know how it works. Other people don't even know how we distribute our funds. But if a giver is there, they may reject that whole idea of just drumming up funds. Well, we're raising money for missions. We're taking an offering. That's really what we're doing. And if we don't say it clearly, some people will misunderstand. But because they're out of the will of God, they could reject that as being something here. They might miss an important opportunity and to give wise counsel. Perhaps there is a better way. But because of their rejection of all of that, then the funds that are needed might not be going to a very worthy ministry. Sixth thing, the giver can often be found to give too sparingly to family. The frugality of a giver is often extended to his own wife and children. They might be so frugal and they might have the points down and get this, but when he does not show the same concern and care and delight in meeting their needs as he does in meeting others' needs outside of his family can react to that generosity. You will see to it that they are fed and clothed, but we never get to go out and eat or something. I'm putting words in people's mouths not to make you discontent, but I am saying it's a caution for the giver because they can feel so good and so righteous and so great about what they've done for the Lord that they forget that there's a responsibility to the Lord that he's given them in their own family. And then the giver listens to the Lord and the counsel of his wife. He was going to avoid damaging consequences of unwise gifts and investments. And 7, givers can see giving as projects versus ministry to people. It can get to the thing where, hey, we're just moving from one thing to the next. A giver that loses his focus in meeting the needs of people may be unduly attracted to projects. Something comes along. You hear something on the radio, or there's this ministry opportunity, and you want to get in on that. His desire for measuring value may prompt the giver to build a memorial to his own generosity. The emphasis of scriptural giving is distributing to the necessity of the saints. What really would happen would be connecting people and resources with the needs. And if we forget that, then it becomes a project instead of a ministry. When Paul received an offering, it was for needy Christians. Think about that. You think about the New Testament, think about what Paul said about receiving those things, those funds from Macedonia to send to Jerusalem, or there were other times when other churches needed things, and he would see to it that's what he was taking the offering for. Number 8, the giver must be careful not to cause people to look to him versus God. Who's the supplier of all my need? Where does every good gift come down? From the Father of lights, right? I mean, we say those things, but a giver, if not careful, sees everything right here around as a resource, and sometimes if they're not walking with God, now givers that walk with God, it's all the other things we talked about, but if they're not walking with God, this can happen. A giver, if he lets others know what he's giving, he's going to cause many to turn their attention from the Lord to himself. He also risks the danger of attracting people with wrong motives. They want to be a part of the plan or part of the ministry. We want to get on this bandwagon. It's exciting for a while, okay? These people are trained to appeal to his human inclinations and extract funds that were not directed by the Lord. They are masterful people at living off of other things. This happens and can if a pastor has the gift of giving and he's very busy, then people that come through the church that have needs can take advantage of that sometimes. And so the giver can sometimes, lastly, can sometimes wait too long to give. And if a giver's not instantly obedient to the promptings of the Spirit, he may lose the joy of seeing God accomplish that provision, what God was wanting to do with that gift. He can lose that joy of that accomplishing that ministry through him. The one who was to receive the gift is also going to be denied the opportunity of seeing God provide the funds exactly when it needed to be on time, but it was dependent upon the giver to be prompt to the will of God. Very, very important. One of the things I've noticed is that in church, gifts are not equally proportioned. I think I said that correctly. In other words, you don't need as many givers as you do servers. Did what I just say make some sense? You really don't want there to be a lot of prophets, but you need some balance there. You need some, but you need as many exhorters as you do prophets, and servers, and then people that have the gift of ministry and mercy, rather. You're going to need those things to be in balance. And some of them in a body, you need more than you need others. Look at it this way. Your blood system in your body, you have arteries and veins, and there's major ones. And some of them we could name, like the aorta or something like that. But when it gets down to, are there more miles of arteries, or are there more miles of capillaries that also carry blood? There's a lot of capillaries, a lot more. And they feed down to the smallest and to the most cells of anything else. So you need a lot of those, but you need a few of the others. So it's proportion to what God entrusts to the body for it to function. And God intends for it all to function that well and to do it. And so it's kind of like we report for duty, and and as God gives opportunities in the church, then you exercise your gift in that particular ministry, and then God manifests it, and he begins to use it to his glory. Any questions about the misuses or those last few comments? Wow, that's the best I've done to get all those things there. All right, our next study, Lord willing, as we get back together, is going to be the spiritual gift of, it's said of ruling in Romans here, You could call it organizing or administration would probably be more modern terms. That doesn't mean that it's, they're all telling people what to do and how to get some things going. And you need somebody with that gift of organization. And so we'll study that next time, Lord willing. Okay, one more shot. Any comment? All right.